So, I wanted to just make like a quick video about my thoughts on the network test for the Dusk Bloods. So, I managed to get in, and the first network test, as many have found out, was definitely not really well received because not a single person could log in, right? And a lot of people are just like, oh, so much for that network test, right? But the following network tests, um, it was pretty smooth, all things considered, because the way that they rolled out these like network tests is basically like within a 4 hour time window, people were able to log in that designated time window, and then once that time was up, people were just booted out. But the first one, definitely not a single person, but then every subsequent one, from what I gather and from what I've experienced, was pretty smooth. I only managed to only play like a cumulative total of like 4 hours, so like one whole network sessions test worth, I guess. And honestly, from those 4 hours, I felt like the game was kind of very PvP focused in comparison to Nightreign, because this game is coming off the heels of Nightreign, where that game was very divisive, where a lot of the fans were just kind of split down the middle, right? Saying, some people are saying that the game was great, other people are saying that it just wasn't for them, or that the game was bad or whatever. I fortunately fell in the camp that I thought Nightreign was a great game. I actually 100%ed it, sank a lot of hours into it, and I thought it was great. It definitely felt like the first 10 hours of the experience in Nightreign were like, once you've, you know, played the game for like the first couple hours, you already got a feel for how the rest of the subsequent playthroughs and the hours you're going to be spending are going to play like, right? And whether or not you fall in the camp of you like it or you hate it or whatever, like, I feel like Nightreign was divisive because of that like battle royale aspect to it that they were experimenting with. And I like how they kind of like weaved that into like the narrative of the game, because even though it was like this online centric game where you could play with two other players and you could go through the map and just do your thing and then help each other fight the bosses and stuff. I thought it was pretty interesting with how they went about doing it, and once you got into the flow of it, it was actually pretty fun. But when it got frustrating, it got frustrating. Like when people would leave, oh man, that was so fucking annoying. Like there wasn't really much you could do about that, or like it was a game that it's definitely fun when it's fun, and it was frustrating when it wasn't. Whether you get uncooperative teammates, someone ran off, does their own thing or whatever. And the thing is, that aspect, that player aspect, is the thing that focus that frustrates a lot of the people that had their gripes and criticisms with Nightreign, because of like their experiences and encounters with like a lot of the people. Like that was the thing that probably upset them, like enough for them to be deterred from continuing with the game, right? But I felt like the way they weaved the game's narrative into Nightreign was actually pretty cool. Like, if you can get past that online play hurdle, whether you like it or not, like, I feel like you find that the characters that you get to choose from, like the Revenant, the Wilder, those characters, the Duchess, super fun. They each had their own flavor to the game, and you almost like engage with the game differently because of it. So I feel like every character had their own identity, and they interacted with each other in such a fashion that it felt like they were creating like a small little family. That's kind of like how I interpreted Nightreign, where all these Nightfarers came together with the focus of bringing down the Night Lord. And then, with typical FromSoft fashion, with the way you would engage with a lot of these NPCs, you would go about them with like every time you would complete something or like reach a checkpoint in some form of progress, like whether you defeat like a certain Night Lord or whatever, and then it opens up like a dialogue tree or dialogue option with a specific character. You have to find them in a specific location and stuff. Things that we've come to be familiar with in previous FromSoft titles. That's something that was very much prominent in Nightreign, where if you took the time to like talk to those NPCs or like a lot of the other characters that you were not in control of, because you get to choose the Nightfarer, and then you get to engage with the other Nightfarers that you're not in control of as like their own personal character, as you would with like a lot of other RPGs and stuff. And I thought that was super cool how they each had their own little identity, their own personality, and their own ultimate goal and backstory for like how their role is in the game, and they all kind of come together, they form that bond. And I felt like some of them were like very, very, interesting people, and I wanted to get to know them better, and I felt like I grew a little bit attached to some of them. And that's, even though it was a multiplayer focused game, it still had that single player FromSoft flavor, that, that DNA that was weaved into the multiplayer. So if you were the type of person that got filtered out because you just didn't click with the gameplay, I mean, it kind of sucks, because I feel like that, like Nightreign was a great game. For the Duskbloods, however, to be fair, this was a network test. So a lot of it is focused on the actual gameplay portion, on how the network runs, right? And I felt like overall, the experience was pretty smooth, minus the first session, but like every subsequent one was pretty smooth. I played it on the handheld, mostly. Like I didn't play it docked, and I say smooth in the context of like, I didn't get booted out, like I didn't crash, I didn't really, like once I was in a match, I was pretty much locked into that match, and nothing really happened that I thought to myself, oh, this is really poor network connection or anything like that. Like I had a pretty steady connection, and everything ran great. A lot of the issues and gripes mainly come from the game being like 30 FPS or something, and it's funny because so many people are saying, this is Bloodborne on the Switch, but in this case, this really is Bloodborne. It was like 30 FPS, bro. But minus those like little gripes, the gameplay was overall pretty solid. But I felt like it did have tidbits and crumbs of like narrative being weaved in, and those segments I was like, oh, this is cool, right? But I feel like the bulk of that little network test demo definitely was just like the online PvP aspect, and where you have to like survive the waves. And if you don't have like certain amount of points with that respective wave, like wave 2 or 3, you get culled. So you essentially get booted out, and then the remaining 3 combatants get pitted into an arena, so they have to like duke it out, and the last one standing is the victor, right? You started like emoting and shit, right? But the thing is that I didn't feel like I saw enough of a compelling like narrative, for me to like be invested in the network test. Like I have to keep like using that as a disclaimer. But overall, my impressions were just kind of weak with Duskbloods, because it didn't have that narrative component, or it didn't have enough of story for me to be intrigued in. Like in the trailers, you would see like some Majora's Mask looking ass moon looking down, and then you see a character kind of looking up like, dang, And that's the type of stuff you look at and you're like, man, like that's interesting. Like how does this play a role in the world of the game? But in the network test, it was just like people picking like certain characters. Like a lot of people were memeing Zork, and they're just kind of beating themselves at players. And I felt like a lot of people were picking Albert. I saw a lot of Alberts, a lot of Yans. And I saw quite a good amount of Laylas too. And I mainly played Long, I think was her name, Tranglan, I don't know how to pronounce it. And I loved her design. I love her aesthetic. It was super cool. But I kind of felt like her abilities, like the cloak ability and the snake ability was super cool. But I kind of felt like other players kind of had like a bit of an edge up on me. Now, mind you, like I'm not like all that good at the game and all that, but from my experience as just like an average player, I felt like other players just kind of had a bit more like versatility to their characters. You know, like the Laylas were just kind of like keeping their distance, just shooting my shit down. You know, the Yawns were just kind of like, they were kind of like pretty well paced for all things considered. Like they would come at me aggressively and then they would kind of back out. And, you know, I felt like the Yawns were definitely playing it kind of like Bloodborne style, like with like the cleavers and stuff. They would kind of maintain the distance, zoom in whenever they saw an opening, stuff like that. And I felt like the other characters just kind of had more tools at their disposal compared to my character, and I wonder if that's something that's going to play a factor in like the full release of the game, where like once the game has been out for a certain amount of time, that this is the type of thing where that skill gap, where like players that are familiar with the game's flow and the pacing of it and all that could be the thing that offsets the difference between someone that could potentially be playing a character that may be better equipped or more versatile than your character. But then that raises the question, like, at what point does it make it so that the character will be the thing that determines the victory, right? Because it's not like certain characters are slow or anything, because the Duskbloods is all about, you know, the mobility and the movement and stuff. And I feel like every character has that same like zipping and zooming. You have like 4 air jumps, you have 1 air dash, you know, you're playing fucking Devil May Cry over here. And it's not like Zork is like fundamentally slower, as far as I'm aware at least. Like that fat Chungus can just zip and zoom, right? He's zooming. And I feel like every character kind of has that level playing field in the context that like they have that same mobility, but then what separates them could be those abilities that could potentially be more useful at that encounter. And then you come into concepts like the forming the alliances and stuff. I formed an alliance a few times with some others, and it's actually pretty cool. But I kind of feel like whenever I was just trying to do the PvE aspect, where I'm just trying to like, you know, gather the points that I need to like progress to the next round, and like there's random ass, you know, Layla or a Yawn would pull up to me and just start like slapping me, and I'm just like, bro, like I'm just trying to play the damn game, right? And I feel like it's that online aspect that's just kind of frustrating to me, you know what I mean? Where I just kind of want to do that PvE portion, but then the P gets introduced, right? These players pull in, and then they just, you know, kind of dampen my experience where I'm just trying to get through, and it's just kind of annoying, because if they're not wanting to form an alliance, they're just gonna want to like kill you or whatever. Like like very rarely is it kind of like a live and let live type of moment. It's just kind of annoying, and I was never really completely fond of Souls PvP aspect and like Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3 and all that. I was never really fond of it to begin with, so this game just seems to kind of lean and cater more to those demographic, or that demographic of players, and you know, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're that type of player that's really into that PvP stuff, this could probably be like a very engaging experience. But I personally feel like unless this is like a Nightreign situation where it has like a narrative weaved in and embedded into like the actual online component or that PvP aspect, this game's gonna be like a bit rough for me. Like, I don't know, this could be a game that kind of like steers me away, but I'm waiting for reviews, like full reviews, because I heard that the Duskbloods is gonna feature even more characters to choose from than the pre-selected ones that we could choose in the network test. Like quite a few more, like a lot more. Like I don't really remember the exact number, but I feel like as long as there's enough diversity and enough of a palette for the characters, I feel like that could be something that would sway me. Because when it comes to these types of games, these hero-based games like Overwatch, Apex, Valorant, like the problem that every game has, like every game in that genre, fundamentally, is that some characters will always just be more dominant than others. So this is something that they could potentially be tweaking as the game progresses, depending on how active this game's development is, you know, how on the ball they are with the tweaks and stuff. Um, if Nightreign's anything to go by, like, I don't know, like, maybe they could potentially invest a little bit more in this game compared to Nightreign. But I mean, I guess we'll see. But I feel like, I don't know if that's something that's going to really be the determining factor of the game's enjoyability to a lot of the players, because there's just this PvP aspect was just so prominent to me that I don't know if this could be the thing that could just make this Duskbloods game yet another niche title that just divides the fan base down the middle, you know, whether you fall in either camp, you know, depends on you. I love Nightreign, but this one I felt like could be the one that could turn me away depending on how the game turns out, you know, like on full release. But I mean, I guess we'll see. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to like get out this short video just to kind of like offer my thoughts on it. And if you have any comments, if you were perhaps one of the players and you're in a completely different mindset, you're like, hey, no, the game's actually goated, it's 10 out of 10, perfect. I mean, that's great. I mean, I guess we can like have a discussion in the comments. So just like let me know what you think, and thank you for watching.